the demands of
Well,
the challenges in front of me were huge. And the only answer that I could see realistically within my reach to answer such great demand was real estate. And that is when I understood the tremendous value of real estate and the fact that anybody, regardless of your background, can leverage and utilize real estate to significantly grow wealth or work towards that kind of very, very big goal.
your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I am your host, as always, Yonah Weiss. Excited to be here today with another great guest. We have Jeanette Friedrich on the show, all the way from sunny LA. Welcome and great to have you. How you doing?
Hey, Yona, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great and I'm excited to be here.
I am as well. I'm excited to have you on the show. I was on your podcast not too long ago, and we went deep into the woods on cost seg and bonus depreciation. And I'm actually excited to say now, as the time of this recording, after Trump was inaugurated, one of the things that came up in passing was the reinstitution of things in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that had phased out. And so we are, I think, on course to bringing back 100% bonus. So that's exciting.
Very exciting. A lot of us are all crossing our fingers and hoping that that is reinstated for sure. It's some very significant benefits. It's very critical to honestly wealth building for real estate investors.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure you know quite a lot a bit about that. A little background for our listeners who may not know, Jeanette, if you wouldn't mind, I know you're with Blue Lake Capital with our friend Ellie Perlman, and you have been there quite a while. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were one of the first people to come onto the team after she started it. And I'd love if you would give our listeners who may not be so familiar with you, a little background, who you are, how you got started, and how you got into real estate.
Yeah, happy to share. It's a crazy ride. I don't think a lot of people that actually end up in real estate intended to be in real estate, so I
For
am
sure.
yet one of those. And so yes, so I'm the director of investor relations and marketing here at Blue Lake Capital. I am the first employee, so it's been really exciting to in the old days it was, just literally myself and Ellie, and now we've been able to grow the portfolio. We just crossed $1 billion in transactions. And so, we've been able to grow the portfolio, the team. It's been very exciting and fulfilling getting to be a part of this from the get go. And I'm very excited for how much further we still have to go. But it is crazy how I actually stumbled into it. And so, my background basically at the time when I first ended up connecting with Ellie, I had done years of executive headhunting in
Mm,
finance and accounting, and then also in IT. I also had been working with some nonprofit organizations and some executive leadership roles there. And I also had a startup company on the side that I had run for about 3 years that was technology based, but focused on veterans and military spouses in
wow.
the San Antonio area, which is where I lived at the time that I first connected with Ellie. And, it's a dramatic story, but I was a single mother at the time, and I had 3 of my daughters, living with me, all, kind of in between elementary school and just starting in high school. And one of my daughters became very, very, very ill.
Mm,
And I ended up resigning from my job and, was sitting in a hospital with my daughter, realizing the magnitude of the changes we were about to face and trying to figure out, how I was going to navigate, that kind of
wow.
challenge. So I was looking for something, I laugh now, low stress and part-time that I could do from a hospital room. And that's actually how I ended up connecting with Ellie. And, it actually turned out to be incredibly fortuitous. I didn't like real estate. I didn't really want to be associated with real estate. I thought it was more of like I don't know, like a Ponzi scheme or pyramid scheme or something like that. So I was completely ignorant as to really how real estate even operated. And ironically, that was one of the things that Ellie liked about me was I was coming to the table with a very diverse and strong skill set, but with no exposure to real estate. So
Hmm.
therefore, I wouldn't have necessarily the bad habits that others might pick up that have already established
Interesting.
careers in real estate. And so, she and I both talked about it and I laughed. And I told her, well, if you can convince me, then I can convince anybody else. And so,
That's a good
um,
point. I mean, that's
yes,
really a great selling point too, because obviously you had the background in the recruiting, the headhunting, which is a lot of sales, right? You're trying to convince both
absolutely.
sides of the table, right, to make things happen. And that's huge when it comes to investor relations. But sorry to cut you off. It's I find your story is very similar to mine in a way. Also, I had a major health crisis in my family about 10 years ago, where 9 years ago, that really also kind of jettisoned me into the direction of real estate. So, but yeah, no, go on how you met Ellie and then came on. But I mean, you were looking for something part time, sounds like, in real
Mhm.
estate. But what was she looking? I mean, she was looking for just kind of at the time. I know she had been started off. She did a few syndications at the time, if I recall. She had been like a GP with other. I know a few other big syndicators, but hadn't really done any deals on her own yet.
Correct. Yes, correct. So at the time that I met her, she had done one co-GP, but she had not done that one on her own. She was, JVing with someone. And at the time that I met her, she was just closing on her first, or excuse me, her second partnership with another sponsor. And so she was basically looking, the way it was advertised was for a social media specialist slash assistant. And so she was looking, for a two for oneer. And so, I thought, well, this is very easy. I can definitely do this. And I needed something I could do remotely from the hospital because this is, before COVID and there wasn't a lot of options out there.
Right.
And so I agreed to take on the role. I could do it remotely. And it was I could do it with my eyes closed or my hands tied behind my back. I mean, it just, part time social media, executive assistant, essentially. That did not last long. And I laugh about that a little bit. So, given my entrepreneurial background, at having had my own startup company, as well as, kind of probably my recruiting and sales background, I quickly started, independently coming up with, oh, this would be cool. We should do this. And I would just do it. And then I would show it to her. And then I would say, oh, you know what else would be good? We should do this. And then I would just show. And so, of course, she was like, knock yourself out.
Right.
And so it didn't take very long before I, really moved into the role of investor relations, especially also given my background in nonprofit and fundraising and donor
Right.
relations. And so, yeah, it didn't take long before, I ended up director of investor relations. And, it was really interesting. My second day of working for Ellie, we were actually airlifted from one hospital across the state of Texas to another hospital. And Ellie, of course, offered to let me, start at a later date and not need to deal with it. And I said, oh, no, 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 I'm a single mom. I have to work.
Oh,
And, she asked me, Is it always like this?" And I was, "No, no, it's gonna get better." We ended up in the hospital for a month that time, and that
well,
month ended up to kind of being in and out of the hospital for about a 3-year period of time. But the reason I bring that up is because this is where the epiphany really hit for me. So, as a single mom, at that point in my life, I had thought that my kids would grow up healthy, they would go to college, they would be on their own, right? Yes, go do
yeah.
that. But then when my daughter got sick, I realized that, just being able to maybe make 6 figures a year and get your kids through, college was good not gonna be enough, was not gonna be the story of how my family maybe needed me to be there for them. And so the magnitude of realizing that I might have to support my daughter financially, or at least help supplement her throughout adulthood, given her ongoing chronically ill conditions. She has autoimmune diseases. And then, believe it or not, I have another daughter who actually is deaf, and she was born that way. So I was already accustomed to that challenge.
Well,
But now I'm looking at, basically two of my daughters probably need to have their entire adulthood, potentially supplemented. And think on top of that, now I also need to think about still trying to work and plan for retirement. And I'm a single mother. So the demands of
well,
the challenges in front of me were huge. And the only answer that I could see realistically within my reach to answer such great demand was real estate. And that is when I understood the tremendous value of real estate and the fact that anybody, regardless of your background, can leverage leverage and utilize real estate to significantly grow wealth or work towards that kind of very, very big goal. There's really not a lot of other ways to do it. And so when I really understood it, that's when I drank the Kool-Aid
Hmm.
and it really became a true passion of mine.
For sure. And once you drank it, the Kool-Aid, you can then give that over to everyone you're speaking with. I mean, obviously, as director of investor relations, the main job is essentially educating others and including them along the journey. And I think someone with a background like yours who is totally not foreign to it, you probably share your experience as well with others and what it was like for you and kind of coming to that realization. So at what point did you start investing alongside, or were you given equity in some of the deals that you actually really the light bulb probably went off like a huge amount at that time? Because we're talking about 2018, 2019, like when that was like the golden era of multifamily syndication, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm not allowed to disclose my
Of course, of
compensation,
course, of course.
so I have to say that. But I will say that the day that I was able to start signing PPMs myself, for me, was revolutionary.
Hmm.
Just revolutionary. And it was several years ago. It really was just probably one of the most powerful moments of my life, especially honestly at the time, as a single woman, there was already the impression of being able to break through that glass ceiling and the
Mm.
challenges and the stigma of being a single mom and trying to have a career and,
Right.
trying to get to that next level financially. The odds are against you generally, speaking in those types of circumstances. So, the day that I got to sign, candidly, not just one PPM, but PPM after PPM after
Yeah.
PPM was a magical moment for both me and the trajectory of my family. And,
Wow.
since that time, thankfully my daughter finally has gotten on some treatments that have improved the quality of her life significantly. We ended up moving from Texas to Boston to set up our first headquarters out there, which was an amazing adventure. Now we've moved from Boston to LA
Right.
because we've consolidated divisions. And, now I've got my family here in LA. And it's just been a huge blessing, not just for me, but also unbelievable for my family too.
Wow.
And I'm very excited to also share, actually, hot off the press, that I have never been a homeowner and I will be closing on a home in just a couple of weeks. And it'll be the
Wow.
first home me and my family have ever had. Yeah. So I did get married last year. So thankfully, my husband is helpful too on that front, but very exciting just to really have our lives improve over and over and over again.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's amazing. And a home in LA is not a small feat. So
No, no, we're a little further south, but yes.
yeah, but nevertheless, Southern California is, unless you're going like very far south, like Tijuana or something, it's it's still very expensive wherever you go. I grew up in LA, and yeah, it's amazing how certain markets out there have just appreciated so much. It's
Yes, it
ridiculous.
is. Yes, it is. We're actually taking the conservative approach, I'm not embarrassed to say at all. There's just other pockets of Southern California where you can get such a bigger bang for your buck. So
Yes.
we're actually moving to an area in Riverside County called
Oh, nice.
Canyon Lake that
Okay.
I'm really excited about. We're currently renting in Orange, which is beautiful, but we were completely priced out of the market in Orange. It's very expensive. I mean, comparably, what we are getting in Riverside County for about 700,000, we wouldn't be able to even come close to that in Orange County. In Orange County, it's about 1.5 million to even
Crazy.
get close to the equivalent. Yeah. So, a little super commuting is the only sacrifice that I have to make to do that, but we thought it was just the kind of the more prudent way for us to go. But and I'm super excited about it, and I think it's just a matter of understanding how to kind of prioritize what's most important to you and what are you willing to do to get it. And so if super commuting is what I got to do, super commuting is what I'm going to do.
Well, good for you. Definitely not easy, but definitely doable,
Yeah,
So
absolutely. There's far harder things in life.
for sure, for sure. And with either I don't know what the transportation system is like in LA. I haven't been back in quite a while, but if you have a Tesla electric car, or get on the train, I don't know
Mhm.
what they have out there, but you can do a lot of work while you're commuting. So it's not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
There's opportunities to maximize your time there. And it probably, what you said earlier about kind of like as a single mother and just as a woman in general, breaking through kind of those barriers that were put in front of you. I mean, how is it, having someone like Ellie not someone like, how is it having Ellie, right at your side the whole time, basically, who also was someone just like that. I know her background in, corporate as an attorney and kind of going on her own into real estate with very little, background knowledge in real estate and just kind of jumping through and what you've accomplished at this point several years later with over, as you mentioned, over $1 billion in transactions. To me, that's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellie is incredibly inspiring. And it really might sound very cliche, but I'm very serious about it. One of the things that I really have enjoyed about working for her is helping to support her accomplish, quote, the American dream that she really sacrificed a lot to come here and try to make happen.
Yeah.
And the way that she talks about getting to be an American, the value that she sees in it, it truly resonates with me very much so. And it makes me grateful to be here in the United States. And I love seeing her story coming together just as much as mine has. And it's just very inspiring. She is bold, she is tenacious, she has huge goals. And that works great for me because I'm very much the same way. We don't ever really see any reason why we can't do something. We only see that there's if somebody else has done it, we see no reason why we can't either.
Hmm.
And if you put together the right combination of people and then build a team around that same attitude and mindset, it becomes contagious and it's very important. So she's been very inspiring to me. I think I like to think, one, a lot of her respect for being able to handle the challenges and struggles that I went through while maintaining my focus on work and helping her to grow Blue Lake despite a bunch of, super challenging situations that I was in,
Sure.
talking to investors while I'm in the hospital with my daughter, hitting the stupid machine that's being, still raising capital in a hospital room in those very
Wow.
stressful circumstances, it hasn't been easy. So I think that we've been just a very good team. And I think that that kind of foundational attitude has just also helped to spread to other team members as we've slowly hired over the years.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear
Yeah.
kind of to transition here a little more about what it is you're actually focusing on now. Obviously, the real estate market has changed a little bit over the past year or two with interest rates. The market has been challenging. And I'm
Mhm.
curious to know what Blue Lake's, focus is right now in terms of acquisitions, repositioning assets, things like that. And I know primarily, if I'm not mistaken, you're focused on kind of like B class, multifamily syndications in the Sun Belt, right? That's like like everyone. But correct me if I'm wrong, and please kind of I'd love to hear what your focus is now and where you're going, which direction you're going.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, Blue Lake is unique in the fact that we are backed by a family office, and that is different than a lot of other sponsors out there.
Mhm.
And, it's truthfully a huge benefit, right, for Blue Lake to have that type of massive backing. That definitely has been helpful for us. And as the market has come under a tremendous amount of pressure, as everybody knows, it's been much more challenging to raise capital. We just closed on a deal in November, but it was not easy. I had to work harder for that close than probably any deal we've ever done, simply because investor sentiment has been very, very shaken, very
Sure.
stressed, with everything that's been going on. And so, the reality is that when we recognize those types of shifts, we think it's critical to be an agile team and to be able to quickly pivot and recognize, okay, things are changing. We've got to actually also pivot and change with that strategy. So, we're still 100% focused on multifamily. We're staying focused on our bread and butter. That is our expertise. That is our track record.
Mhm.
We thought about, going after some of the shiny objects around, like maybe starting a debt fund or doing other things. But ultimately, we decided that being disciplined and focused is what has gotten us this far. And it's what we're going to continue to invest in to get us to the next level. The next level is we're in a big stage of growth. We're very bullish on the market right now. And rather, though, than focusing exclusively on syndications, what we are doing is we are focusing more on established relationships and making longer established relationships
Mhm.
with other family offices. So we're looking at focusing on really building and establishing more long-term strategic partnerships with family offices. We'll
Mhm.
still open a portion of those deals to syndications, but it'll be a much smaller
Mhm.
amount than we used to do it, which is nice too, because it also gives us some more flexibility. So, we typically have been focused on value add and we're going to continue to be focused on value add, but value add is not penciling as as it used to pencil.
Right.
So we're also looking, at core and core plus and stabilized assets that are just, strong cash flow, good appreciation, potentially longer term hold. And that's easier to do when you're partnering per se with a family office as opposed to syndicating a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And now talk to me a little bit about what that's like. You talked about, kind of the uniqueness of being backed by family office. How did that come to be? First of all, I'm curious if you can share any of the details of that partnership and what does that actually mean as opposed to for our listeners who may not be so familiar with what's a family office. And I don't need you to like give a breakdown, what a family office is
Yeah.
totally, but you know, in general, how that came to be and what deal structures kind of look like for you now as opposed to a syndication.
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So, a family office, I know we just throw these terms around like everybody knows this stuff. And of course, nobody talks about this stuff except us. So, a family office is typically a single family that has a net worth of 100 million or more in disposable assets. So, very, very wealthy family. Sometimes it can also take the shape of a multifamily office, which is maybe two or three smaller families that maybe each have 25 million in disposable assets, getting together and forming kind of a multifamily office. It
Hmm.
can also look like that. So you don't have to be the Rockefellers to be a family office. There are much smaller family offices or multifamily offices. But typically, these are families that are positioned and their priorities are very different than your typical regular everyday investor. They're really focused on generational wealth. They're
Right.
really focused on legacy. They're really focused on wealth preservation. They have, kind of they're not trying to create wealth, they've got it. They're trying to keep it, preserve it, and then, make sure that it's strategically growing across generational boundaries. So that's a very different, type of investor mindset
Hmm.
and structure than your everyday investor
Right.
that is trying to build wealth, that's looking for strong cash flow, fairly short hold periods, a good equity multiplier, and
Right.
wash and repeat and do it again. And so, there's different kind of profiles, if you will, to those. So, first of all, that's kind of what a family office is. And when we're looking at deals with family offices, we're looking at it as more of a 90-10 split where they're bringing potentially 90% of the equity. We're bringing in the other 10%. We may syndicate a portion of that. That's actually more on the GP side than it is on the LP side, but that's kind of how those deals are structured differently than your typical syndication.
Gotcha.
Now, as far as how Ellie got into or backed by a family office, full disclosure, her husband's family is a family office. And
Okay.
so, it was through marriage. Now, the funny part is when she met him, he didn't even have a car and she was driving him around places. She thought he was completely broke. His apartment had almost no furniture, but she just really, really liked him. And so it wasn't actually until well after they were engaged that she became aware of the status of the family, if you will. And they're still very hard and humble, hardworking and humble people. They really are. And they have not gone lightly on her. So I have been present with her when we, have brought an investment opportunity to the family office. It is just like, if not more intense than presenting it to an investor. I'm talking boardroom,
Right. Of
full decks, full financial analysis, full due diligence reports.
course.
They have put her through the grinder, and I've sat side by side with her as they've done this. So, it's not at all, oh, you just married into a rich family. Not at all. So, she's worked very hard for it. And I think, in some ways it's been great for her because I think that if you can withstand the grinding that a family office will put you through, you can definitely handle talking to investors
Sure.
because their due diligence is very intensive.
Absolutely. And I imagine that the returns, as you mentioned, they're not looking for kind of the equity multiples that maybe a retail investor might have, that, the returns may be totally different. The structure you're talking about, maybe potentially more longer hold periods. And that may allow you to acquire totally different types of properties or things that you wouldn't be able to do with a syndication.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And, there's also other components that are very important to them. So, tax harvesting and how that's structured and, how that's allocated, those are also other components you can always negotiate on that may be of far more value to them than cash on cash.
Hmm. Interesting.
Hmm.
Fascinating. There's a lot to be out of there. So if there are anyone listening out here who's a GP, who's maybe a real estate syndicator and looking to try to find a family office besides marrying into one, what do you do? Because you mentioned that maybe you're potentially looking for other strategic partnerships as well in the future. Like, where do you go? I know there's like the Family Office Club, right? Richard Wilson and that kind of stuff. But I mean, what other avenues would you find to make those relationships?
Yeah, well, so the Perlman family office is not the only family office that actually invests with us. So
Hmm,
we
okay.
have other family offices that also invest with us. And it's a really important note for, I think, any syndicator to take note of, which is you don't always know who's a family office and who isn't. So the way that one of the other family offices ended up partnering with us is they came into the deal
Just as a listener.
conservative minimum investment, nothing shiny, no revelations of we're a family office. So, that's one of the things that's really important to understand is, you want to treat every investor the same, whether they're writing a check for 50,000 or 5 million. You want to make sure that you're honoring those relationships because you don't know who is necessarily family office or not.
Right.
And so it wasn't until after they had invested with us initially, humbly, incognito almost, if you will, that then later down the road, we learned they were a family office. And then obviously their investment size increased. And frankly, word of mouth matters a lot. So a lot of
Sure.
family offices, when you know a family office or you're in a family office, it's much easier to begin to bridge those relationships. Family offices are hard to be able to quote penetrate because if people know their family office, they're getting approached by people all the time. It makes
For
it much
sure.
more difficult.
Of course.
Yeah. And so my advice is to one, pay very close attention to your current investors and honor your investor base because you never know at all, what someone's background actually is. You might actually have a family office and not even know it.
Yep.
My second piece of advice is that some family offices are very visible. They're very easy to find on LinkedIn. And the worst way to approach a family office is, hi, here's my deal. Can I have money? I would not even remotely try
Right.
that.
Or anyone for that matter, right? Like,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes, exactly. So, it's really being intentional and, seeing if you can have an opportunity just to meet with them, get to know them. Typically, when it comes to family offices, they truly are very serious about having, their values align
mhm.
with whoever they work with. They only like long-term relationships. They're not looking for short-term relationships. Track record is huge. Make sure you have your ducks in a row and can speak and verify your track record is mass critical if you want to be taken seriously. Those are the kinds of conversations, typically that you only get one or two shots at making an impression and you need to be prepared to make the right one.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. It has come up a few times before on the podcast over the years, but I haven't really gone into too much detail. But I'm really glad to hear kind of what your experience has been and how you've kind of navigated that, with the growth of Blue Lake. So happy to hear the growth and excited to hear where you're going forward from here. But
Yeah.
on that note, Jeanette, I'd love to, the time flies over here, but I'd love to transition what we call the final four. So these are
All
the
right.
four questions I ask all my guests. First one for you is, what's the worst job that you ever had?
The worst job, I
Mm,
can't disclose where it was at because I actually ended up signing an NDA and resigning. But it was where the CEO that I reported to would actually eat my lunch out of the refrigerator. Like I would bring a sandwich from home and then I would go to retrieve said sandwich and half of my sandwich would be eaten. It was one of the just most insane jobs
that's
I
bizarre.
ever had. Yes. Unbelievable. Yes.
I'm sure that wasn't the only reason you left, but that is
Uh, it tells you about maybe kind of the
yeah,
rest of,
exactly.
of the leadership skill there. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't sound too pleasant. Second question, what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
So it rocked my world. I've read multiple books and people like to talk about a lot of different books, but the one that really, really, really resonated with me right where I needed it to hit was The Secrets of the Millionaire Mindset.
Mm,
It's a fantastic book. And in the book, it talked about the difference between basically having a growth mindset versus a limited mindset, and really about the difference between playing offense with money versus defense with
mhm,
money, especially as a single mom. I had finally, thanks to my time with Ellie, I finally had started to really make, some substantial, what I considered substantial money. And I had a bonus one time, and all I wanted to do was save it and like, not do anything with it. And I knew that that was not the right choice to make, but it was what I wanted to do because it would make me feel better, you know?
mhm,
And so when I read that book, I realized that I was still thinking like I was poor. I was still thinking defense with my money instead of my money as a tool. I need to use it offensively and grow it. And it is very difficult to really make that transition
Mhm.
mentally and actively, recognize when you are thinking defensively instead of offensively. So, that was probably one of the best books I've ever read.
Yeah, that itself is a huge paradigm shift. So I totally get
It's
that
hard.
and can relate to that 100% because that's
Yeah,
definitely
it's hard.
a transition I went through as well. And I can definitely relate. So we're going to put
Yeah.
that in the show notes. Anyone else wants to check out the millionaire mindset. Awesome. Third question. What's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
You know,
Don't be
I'm
shy.
not.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, yeah. Typically, if I'm interested in something, I'll kind of just get after it, but there are certain dance moves that I just don't think I was made to do, you know what I mean? But I do have fantasies of being like an unbelievable, like, mambo dancer or something, but I don't think that that's my skill set.
Okay. Listen,
But maybe I'll try it one of these days.
it's never too late to try. That's
Yeah.
can't hurt to try. Well, fourth and final question then we'll end it off with what does success mean to you?
That's a really good question. I think that given everything that I've been through, with my family and all the things we've had to work through, and even with the company, is at the rather it's the end of the day or the beginning of the day, I think that it's incredibly important that you can look yourself in the mirror and be proud of what you see and be proud of who you see. And I don't even mean that you need to look good. You can look like a gigantic mess, and that's fine. The question is, have you lived your life
Mm,
giving your best, knowing that you have given your best to where you can make impact, where you can? Do you know that you've given it all? And if you know that you are giving it your all, then I think that that is the definition of success. And I think being able to look yourself in the mirror and understand that you are recognizing somebody you have mad respect for because they've given it their all, that's what I would call success.
wow.
You can't really do more than that.
I mean, that's very powerful. It is. I'm like kind of getting the chills over here just hearing that
Yeah.
description because we, like you said, it's an amazing question because everyone sees it slightly differently, and we've had up to 450 episodes here of Voice Advice. We've had a lot of different perspectives, many on the same wavelength, in terms of having that self respect. But the way that you put it there is very profound. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that perspective. And on that note, I wish you a lot of continued success in what you're
Thank you.
doing. And finally, where can our listeners find you or reach out to you if they want?
Oh, I'm so easy to find. Ellie got tired of doing the podcast a few years ago. So now I'm all over YouTube somehow. So you can definitely find me on YouTube. We have our Blue Lake Capitals channel there. I'm also on LinkedIn. And of course, if anybody wants to just directly reach out to me, my email is Jeanette, JeAnnettte at bluelake-capital.com.
Awesome. Got the double letters. So
Yeah.
easy to remember. We'll make sure to put all that in the show notes and, just grateful for you taking the time today. I know it's been a busy few weeks for you with everything that's happened in LA and everything that's going on out there, but grateful for you to join me. And like I said, wishing you much continued success.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. And to our listeners, thank you all for joining us all the way to the end once again. And remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.